So on May 21st of this year, officers responded to a brandishing of a firearm incident that occurred near the intersection of Blossom Hill Road and Snell Avenue. As officers investigated that case, our assaults unit detectives began the thorough investigation of that incident and located and identified the suspect. That suspect also was arrested on June 4th for the homicide that occurred on Monterey and Rancho. As we continued through the investigation, detectives acquired a search warrant for his residence based on the initial case of the brandishing. As they continued through the investigation, that search warrant was executed on the 8th, and the discovery of over 60 firearms were located inside that residence. Of those 60 plus firearms, 25 of them were listed as assault weapons in the state of California. 2 of them were personally manufactured firearms, or ghost guns, and 2 of the other pistols that were located were also reported stolen. In addition to the firearms located, there were several high-capacity magazines and thousands of rounds of ammunition that will be added in terms of weapons charges to the initial investigation, which again is the brandishing incident.
Tell us, officer, how important is it to get that many guns off the street in your community?
Well, certainly our patrol officers are very active. Our culture in San Jose is to be proactive, build community trust, make sure that our visitors and our residents feel safe in the city. Part of the way that we do that is executing search warrants from the Detective Bureau, making investigative stops, and through our special operations teams, making sure that criminals who are identified as possessing handguns or rifles or firearms in general are taken off the streets. Every firearm that we receive from a criminal or from a drug dealer is one less assault, one less fired shot, one less homicide. And that is the most important reality that we're facing today, but we can't do it alone. Oftentimes we rely on the public's assistance to help us. Sometimes it's reactive, based on a call for service, just as this case led up to. Other times it's based on anonymous reporting, and we accept those reports, whether it's through Crime Stoppers or by word of mouth, the old-fashioned way, coming to the police department or calling it in. If you know of somebody who has a firearm, who should not have a firearm, let us know. We will investigate it and we'll look into it. And that doesn't just apply to people who have criminal intent or are members of a gang or are drug dealers. It also applies to individuals who perhaps are having mental health issues, want to hurt themselves or perhaps hurt others. We want to make sure that we get that gun away from that individual before tragedy strikes.
And what kind of an impact do you think taking this many guns off the street could potentially have on this community?
Last year we seized over 960 firearms, most of those being ghost guns. Of the last 2 officer-involved shootings of this year, they were ghost guns. We know for a fact that more illegal guns on the streets in the hands of criminals equates to more crime. And so this seizure of over 60 firearms, 25 of them being assault weapons and illegal to own in the state of California, is huge. We're certain that this is going to put a dent. But that doesn't mean that we're going to sit on our laurels. That means we're going to continue doubling our efforts and making sure. And I think the statistics that we've seen, not just recently in this seizure, but many other cases that we put forward, show that our police department has been actively searching and looking for criminals who are armed with firearms so that we can help prevent more crime from occurring.
And what's just your reaction as a law enforcement official to know that somebody has these guns, high-capacity magazines, they're banned assault weapons in California, knowing that somebody has that kind of firepower potentially going up against members of your department? It's probably nice to get them off the street.
I can't presume to know what this individual had in mind or what he was planning. Even if he is a collector or some type of a hobbyist, that amount of firearms, that amount of rifles, that amount of ammunition, specifically the ones who are illegal to possess, the illegally manufactured guns, the stolen firearms, is absolutely a red flag to any law enforcement officer in the state of California. Taking those guns off the streets is most certainly going to lead to saving lives.
Is there anything else that we haven't talked about here that you think people really need to know? What about the June 4th homicide? Are there any more details about that case specifically that you can elaborate on?
No, that investigation is still ongoing. Obviously, this suspect is in custody and was in custody at the time that we identified him as a suspect responsible for the brandishing. As he remains in custody, these additional charges of weapons possession as well as brandishing a firearm will be added to his caseload. And of course, we're still looking into more information on that case. If folks are still hesitant to come forward and perhaps were there at the day of the homicide or perhaps were near the intersection when this brandishing case happened, we ask that they come forward and speak to our detectives, provide their statements, because the human element, again, is so important. Our partnership with the community is really what gets us to solve cases in addition to the hard work of our detectives.
Thank you.
The ghost guns, could you tell if he was manufacturing them himself, or do you know where that gun came from? How he got it?
No, there wasn't any evidence of ghost gun manufacturing based on the seizure of the firearms. The ghost guns themselves were very evident in terms of being formerly 80% completed loads that had been finalized to be 100% functional firearms.
So, but you didn't know if he ordered the polymer receivers and drilled them out himself or got them?
No. Again, part of the seizure, there's been cases where we've seen individuals have all the tools and equipment necessary to manufacture and create these ghost guns. Nothing in the seizure points to this individual manufacturing or processing firearms in general. Just the mere possession of the unregistered ghost gun is a crime within itself.